They slid the papers toward me like it was nothing. "Just some standard medical forms, Mom," Ron said, with that casual smile he uses when he's lying. But something about the weight of the envelope, the way Dana watched me from across the table, too quiet, too alert, made my fingers stiffen. I opened the packet, adjusted my reading glasses, and read the bold title at the top: Transfer of Property and Financial Authority. They thought I'd just sign. At 78, with one minor stroke behind me, they must have figured I'd lost my edge. But I was a librarian for 43 years. You don't spend your life reading fine print and forget what words mean. "I'll look it over later," I said, sliding it back toward them. Dana's lips tightened. Ron chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sure, Mom, no rush. It started a month ago. Not the stroke. That came and went, thank the Lord. It was the sudden affection, the daily visits, the grocery bags I never asked for, the pills rearranged in neat little organizers. They moved through my home like helpers, but always with too much purpose. Dana started cleaning out the garage without asking. Ron replaced my front door lock for safety, and they never left me alone with my phone for long. I live in the same one-story house in Western New York my husband and I built in '72. William passed 12 years ago, right in the den, in his favorite chair. Heart, quick. We raised 2 boys here, though one moved away long ago and stopped calling altogether. Ron stayed nearby, close enough to help, as he always said, but he rarely did. Not until recently. They keep saying the same words: safety, comfort, peace of mind. I hear what they're avoiding. They want me elsewhere. A facility, maybe. Or they want this house, the one with no mortgage and a decent plot, walking distance from the lake. Dana's been browsing real estate apps when she thinks I'm not looking. Last week, they brought up power of attorney over soup. I was stirring my spoon while Ron explained how it's just in case something happens. Dana passed me a pen like it was a napkin. That time I laughed it off. But today, with that envelope on my kitchen table and their expectant faces, it felt different, urgent, a little desperate. After they left, I made myself tea, sat in my chair near the window. The house was quiet again, finally, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting, like something had shifted in a way I couldn't undo. I looked at the envelope again. The title stared back, cold and deliberate. No mention of doctors. No mention of health. Just a quiet attempt to empty my hands of everything I'd built. I thought of the rose bushes William planted out front, how he always trimmed them just so every spring. I thought of the dent in the kitchen counter where I dropped a skillet the year Ron broke his arm and screamed so loud the neighbors came running. Every inch of this place holds something. They think it's just a house. At 2 p.m., I called Marion, my old neighbor and bridge partner. We hadn't talked since I got out of the hospital. She picked up on the second ring. "Iris? Oh, honey, how are you?" "Fine," I said. "Just wondering if your son's lawyer still does elder care documents." She paused. Then her voice changed. "Yes. You want his number?" I wrote it down. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. Women our age know when something's gone sour. I spent the rest of the afternoon going through my files. Property deed, bank statements, insurance, William's old will. I may have moved slower than I used to, but I still knew exactly where everything was. Order was my armor. At dinner time, I made myself half a sandwich and watched the sunset from the porch. A car passed by slowly, Ron's. He didn't stop, just circled the block and kept driving. They think I'm soft, easy, alone. They don't remember the woman who once organized a school lockdown because a parent forged a document. They don't remember that I read everything. Twice. Tomorrow I'll call the lawyer. The first time Ron started showing up unannounced, it was with a pie. Store-bought, of course. Cherry. He set it on the counter like it meant something. "Thought you'd like a treat," he said, peeking around the kitchen as though he hadn't stood in that room since Easter. That was 2 months after the stroke, when I'd just started walking steadily without the cane. I'd already been feeling the shift. My body, my balance, the way my thoughts sometimes paused mid-sentence. Nothing dramatic, just off. Like a painting slightly tilted on the wall. But that didn't mean I'd turned into a fool. He came the next day with D batteries for the flashlight drawer. The day after that, it was a new set of sheets. "Softer for your skin," Dana chimed in. Then came the blood pressure monitor. I thanked them. I even used it once or twice. But the attention didn't feel like care. It felt like they were preparing something. Dana started bringing over little groceries. "Just extras," she said. But I noticed she'd started rearranging the pantry, throwing out things that were past date, even when they weren't. I found my emergency cash envelope missing from its usual spot behind the cookbooks. When I asked about it, Dana looked surprised. "Oh, maybe you moved it yourself." She said it with such fake sympathy that I nearly doubted my own memory. Nearly. They kept calling it help. Help organizing, help simplifying. But I've never once asked for help with my life. One afternoon, I came into the living room and found them going through the file cabinet. "We're just sorting the insurance papers," Ron said. Dana was holding the folder with my will inside. I told them I'd handle it myself. Dana smiled and backed away. Ron chuckled, said I was still as sharp as a tack. But he didn't meet my eyes. A week later, they brought up the idea of hiring a part-time nurse. Just a few hours a week, they said. I asked why. Dana shrugged. "It's just safer. What if something happens while you're alone?" I've been alone for over a decade. Nothing happened. They asked about installing security cameras next. Then one morning, Ron handed me a piece of paper and said, "The doctor's office just needs you to sign this so we can coordinate care." I looked at the bottom of the form. No doctor's name, no clinic letterhead. Just vague language about consent and authorization. I handed it back. "It's okay," I said. "I still manage my own care." That was when Dana stopped smiling as much. My neighbor's cat wandered onto my porch one morning, and as I bent to offer it some tuna, I felt a sting in my hip, a small pain. Nothing serious, but I knew what it would become if I told them. Another excuse. Another lecture about risk and responsibility. So I said nothing. The day after that, Ron installed grab bars in the bathroom. I admit it. They're useful. But I didn't ask. That evening, they brought up the nursing home. Not directly. Dana mentioned a place by the lake. Peaceful, professional staff, gourmet food. Ron called it a lifestyle adjustment. I told them the only adjustment I was interested in was a new cushion for the porch swing. Their silence after that was louder than any argument. I began taking notes in a small notebook I kept tucked behind the sugar jar. Dates, what they said, what they touched, what they moved. I wasn't sure yet what I'd need, but I wanted a record. They were testing the boundaries, inch by inch, seeing how much I'd tolerate before I noticed. But I noticed. William used to say that control is like a garden gate. You open it just once for someone uninvited, and it's 10 times harder to keep it closed the next time. That night, I moved the deed to the house into my locked sewing box. I changed the lock on the back door. I started leaving the hall light on when I slept. I didn't feel paranoid. I felt prepared. They want to play polite. They want to wear me down with smiles and convenience, but I know how things are taken. Not all at once, but little by little. First your routines, then your independence, then your name on the mailbox. But not me. Not quietly. Not easily. I used to get a call from Lillian every Sunday morning. She'd ask if I still made my oatmeal with too much cinnamon and tell me what her granddaughter did at church choir. But it's been 3 Sundays now, and nothing. I tried calling her once. No answer. Left a voicemail. No reply. It wasn't like her. She was the kind who sent thank you cards for borrowed recipes. But I remembered how Dana had said she'd updated my phone contacts so it'd be easier for me. I found the phone one afternoon on the kitchen counter and opened the call log. Ron, Dana, pharmacy, Ron again. No Lillian, no Marion, not even my hairdresser. I checked my voicemail settings. The box was empty. The greeting wasn't my voice anymore, just a generic robotic tone. I stood there with the phone in my hand, heartbeat ticking in my ears. Quiet theft comes in many forms. That same week, I stopped receiving the local paper. Ron said he canceled it for me because the ink smudges too much and the website's better. I told him I liked the ink. He shrugged. No one reads paper anymore. I do. They also took my car in for maintenance. That was 3 weeks ago. Ron said something about needing a special part. Then Dana mentioned how much safer ride shares were. She even showed me an app, but I haven't had the car keys since. I checked the garage once at night. Empty. They hadn't taken it to the shop. They'd taken it away. When I asked directly, Ron said, "It's just temporary, Mom. We don't want you driving after the stroke, that's all." I wanted to say, "You don't want me doing anything." But I kept my voice even. I still have a valid license. He didn't answer, just rubbed the back of his neck and said something about long-term planning. I've lived alone since William passed, but I never felt truly lonely until lately. It's not just the silence. It's the watching. The way Dana lingers after she brings groceries, how she looks around like she's taking inventory. The way Ron answers my phone before I can reach it if it rings while he's here. I saw her one day, flipping through my mail. She didn't even flinch when I walked into the room. "Oh, just sorting out the junk," she said. "I'll decide what's junk," I replied. I started keeping the mail in my bedroom after that. They began hinting at the next phase. Dana said it like she was announcing a vacation. Somewhere calmer, with help around. Maybe by the lake. You'd still have your own room, of course. I looked at her for a long moment. "This is my own room." She smiled as if I'd missed the point entirely. That night, I opened the locked drawer in William's desk and pulled out the documents we'd once prepared but never finalized. The updated will, the medical directive, the contingency trust fund for emergencies. I laid them out carefully on the dining room table. I made a list of questions. I wanted to be ready when I met the lawyer. The lawyer's name was Judith Caldwell, Marion's son's colleague. I called the next morning and scheduled a visit for Friday. I told Dana I had a dentist appointment. She offered to drive me. "I'll manage," I said. She hesitated. "You sure?" I nodded. "Yes, dear." There's a kind of smile people give you when they're already imagining your absence. I saw it on her face then, like she was talking to a houseplant she expected someone else to water soon. By Wednesday, they'd started bringing pamphlets. Not directly to me, just left on the kitchen counter. Brochures for assisted living communities, lifestyle residences, aging with dignity. I gathered them up and put them in the trash under the coffee grounds. Ron fished them out later and left them on my nightstand. Subtle, they're not. But neither am I. That night, I called Lillian again. She picked up this time. "Iris?" Her voice was breathless. "Oh my word, I've been trying to reach you. I thought something happened." "It almost did," I said. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me Dana had called her, said I was recovering and needed rest, and they were minimizing calls to reduce my stress. I felt heat rise up my neck. Lillian said she'd been worried, but didn't want to push. I told her firmly, push next time. Before we hung up, she said, "You sound like yourself again." "I am myself," I said, "and I'm not going anywhere." There's a peculiar coldness in being spoken about in the third person while you're still in the room. It happened last Thursday. Dana was on the phone with someone, probably her sister or one of her networking friends, and she said, "Iris is starting to get confused. We're just trying to make the transition gentle." I was sitting 5 feet away, peeling an apple. "Transition?" I asked. She didn't flinch, just held up a finger like I was interrupting a thought more important than my existence. That night, I wrote the word transition in my notebook, underlined it twice. Then I added a line beneath. "They've already decided I'm leaving. They just haven't told me when." The next morning, Ron showed up with a printout from some online doctor, someone who'd never seen me, never examined me. It was a wellness assessment based on a questionnaire Dana had filled out. "Just preliminary," he said. "But it supports what we've been seeing, some cognitive slippage, signs of early executive decline." He said it gently, as though the softness of his voice could hide the slap of his words. I looked at the paper. "Did the doctor speak to me?" Ron blinked. "No, but Dana gave a detailed history." "I'm still here," I said, "and I can speak for myself." He nodded, but I could see it. The way he thought my words were just more proof. Every sentence I formed was being weighed not for meaning, but for signs of unraveling. They don't listen to you once they think you're fading. They just watch, waiting to be proven right. That afternoon, Dana brought in a new lamp for the bedroom. "Brighter," she said. "Easier on your eyes." She moved my old one into the hallway without asking. I moved it back after she left. I liked the dim light. I've never needed everything to be bright to feel safe. When Judith, the lawyer, came Friday, she arrived with a firm handshake and a quiet briefcase. I liked her right away. She was my age, maybe a few years younger, with a face that didn't pretend at softness. She sat at my dining table and unfolded a thick stack of folders. "I reviewed the documents you sent," she said. "The draft will your husband prepared is outdated. You're listed as sole beneficiary and executor. That's good. But the trust fund, has it been formally activated?" I shook my head. "We always meant to finish it, but..." Time passed. She nodded, as if that was the oldest story in the book. We spent an hour going over everything. The deed, my bank statements, the notes I'd kept. I handed her the folder labeled medical forms that Ron and Dana had pushed across the table 2 weeks ago. She read the title, and her expression darkened. "This is a full property transfer with irrevocable power of attorney," she said. "If you'd signed this, you'd have given up control over your home and finances. Completely." I felt the knot in my chest tighten, then loosen. "They called it a medical release," I said. She looked up. "That's fraud. Manipulative at best, but bordering on something criminal." We discussed next steps. New will, a medical directive that names someone I choose. activation of the trust in my name with protections. Judith was thorough. By the end of the meeting, I felt like I'd been walking in fog and finally hit solid ground. As she packed up, she paused. "Do you want me to send them formal notice?" I thought for a moment. "Not yet." She studied my face. "You want them to show their hand first." I nodded. That night, I slept better than I had in months. On Sunday, they brought over a man they introduced as Dr. Khalid. He wasn't a doctor. Or maybe he was, but he certainly wasn't my doctor. No coat, no clipboard. Just a too-friendly smile and a tablet he kept holding like a magic trick. "He just wants to ask a few questions," Dana said, "to check how you're doing." "I didn't request a visit," I said. Dr. Khalid smiled wider. "It's just a courtesy check, ma'am." I stood very still. "Then I decline." Ron stepped forward. "Mom, don't make this difficult." "It's for your benefit." I turned to Dr. Khalid. "If you set one foot inside this house without my written consent, I'll call the police. Courtesy or not." He hesitated, then quietly turned around and left. Ron was red-faced. Dana folded her arms. "This is what we're talking about," she said. "This paranoia." "No," I said. "This is what I'm talking about. You treat me like a patient, a problem, but this is my house." They didn't respond, just gathered their things and left. After the door shut, I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood in the stillness. The apple peeler was still in the sink from 2 days ago, the same one I used when Ron was 5 and hated the skin. I held it in my hand. They remember a version of me that was soft, giving, tired. They forgot I've lived through more than they can imagine, and I'm not done yet. Ron came alone the next time. No Dana, no folder, no fake smiles. He stood in the kitchen doorway with a Tupperware container in one hand, and that forced cheer in his voice. "Brought your favorite, chicken and rice." I didn't mention the fact that he'd forgotten I haven't eaten chicken in over a year, ever since that stomach bug that left me in bed for 2 days. He knew it once, didn't anymore. I thanked him and set the container in the fridge, untouched. He leaned against the counter and tried to act casual. "So, Mom, I wanted to talk. Not about paperwork, just us." I nodded, sat down. "I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot lately," he said. "It's just, we're worried. You've been so independent, and that's great, really. But it's hard, watching from the sidelines, knowing you're one fall away from something serious." He looked at me with that earnest expression he used when he was 12 and trying to explain how the front porch light got broken. "You've always been strong, but you're getting older. There's no shame in accepting a little help." "There's help," I said slowly, "and there's takeover." He blinked. "You and Dana haven't offered help. You've replaced things. Taken things. Moved things behind my back. You call it kindness, but it feels like siege tactics." He started to speak, but I held up a hand. "I'm not senile, Ron. I forget names sometimes. I take longer to find a word. But I read every word on every page you put in front of me. I knew exactly what you were trying to get me to sign." Silence stretched out across the room. Finally, he said, "We just thought it'd be simpler if things were settled ahead of time." "For whom?" He looked away. I got up and took a spoon from the drawer. Not to eat, just to hold something. "Let me ask you something. If I'd signed those forms, what was the plan? Sell the house? Move me somewhere you could visit once a month? Or not at all?" He didn't answer. I didn't push. "I changed my will," I added. And my lawyer has copies of everything I've signed and everything I refuse to. His face changed. Not rage, not sorrow, just calculation. You talked to a lawyer? Yes. He stood there for a few seconds, then said, "We'll need to talk more about this, as a family." "You're welcome to talk," I said, "but I won't be listening to lies." He didn't slam the door when he left, but it felt like he wanted to. After he was gone, I sat down in William's old recliner and stared at the ceiling. I remembered a time when Ron used to sit on this very floor, building Lego towers, narrating imaginary worlds. Somewhere in the middle of life, he changed. Or maybe I just stopped being useful in the ways that mattered to him. I pulled out the little notebook from behind the sugar jar, flipped through pages of dates, phrases, receipts tucked inside. One entry caught my eye, underlined in red. Ron suggested I cancel property insurance and let them take care of it. That had been 2 months ago. I looked up the number for the insurance company and called. The woman on the line was pleasant, too pleasant, the way customer service tends to be when you're past 70. I confirmed my policy was still in effect. Then I asked if anyone had contacted them recently on my behalf. She hesitated. "Well, there was a man named Ronald Dunn. He said he was your son and that he had power of attorney." "He doesn't," I said. "He never has." "I see." Her voice changed. "Then I'll make a note of that on your account. No one but you may make changes unless we receive legal documentation." "Thank you." I hung up and sat very still. It wasn't just a misstep. It was a pattern. I thought of the bank next, and the health insurance, and my utilities, all the small places where someone could insert themselves if I wasn't paying attention. That evening, I wrote another list. A longer one. Titled it, "Places Where They Might Interfere." I called Judith the next morning and asked her to begin the process of locking down access, passwords, account verifications, secondary authorizations. I felt like I was building a moat around my life. Slowly, methodically. One call, one signature at a time. That night, I made stew. Just for myself. No one else to feed, no one to impress. I ate it in silence, with the radio playing quietly in the background. As I washed the dishes, I glanced at the back door. The old lock was still in place. I'd kept it there beside the new one. Not because it worked well, but because William had installed it with his own hands the week we moved in. 2 locks now. I liked it that way. The morning they brought the documents, I'd just come back from a walk around the block. My hip ached a little, but I liked the air. October in our town always smells like wood smoke and leaves. I'd barely had time to pour a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. Dana walked in first, too cheerful. Ron followed, with a manila envelope under his arm. He placed it on the kitchen table like it was a delivery. "It's just a few medical forms," he said. "Routine stuff. The clinic needs them signed so they can keep coordinating your care." I remember the way his eyes darted as he said it, like he was rehearsing a line he didn't believe in. Dana busied herself opening cabinets, pulling down mugs as if it were her kitchen. I sat, opened the envelope. 3 pages. The first one looked ordinary: name, date of birth, insurance info. But the second page had a heading in bold, "Transfer of Property and Financial Authority." Not small print, not buried in clauses. Just sitting there in the open, like it thought it could pass as innocent. I didn't blink. I just folded the paper in half, set it aside, and looked at Ron. "Who wrote this?" He hesitated. "It's a standard form." Dana's brother has a friend who helps families prepare for long-term care. It says here, I relinquish ownership of my house and give power of attorney to you. Well, yeah, but it's just in case of an emergency, he said quickly. It's not like we're going to use it. It just makes things easier if something happens. If something happens to whom? I asked. You or me? Dana tried to jump in. Iris, really, it's nothing sinister. It's protection. For everyone. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't even touch the papers again. I just stood up and said, You'll get nothing signed today. Ron's face closed off. Not angry. Not shocked. Just calculated. Like someone watching a card game slip out of his hands. Dana scooped up the papers and smiled like I'd spilled milk. Okay. You think about it. No rush. They left 20 minutes later. I watched them from the window as they backed out of the driveway, the envelope still in Dana's hand. I stayed by the window until the car turned the corner. Then I locked the door. It's a strange kind of heartbreak, realizing your child doesn't see you as a person anymore, but as an asset, a liability, something to manage, not someone to respect. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing the sound of William's voice, steady and low. Don't sign anything unless you understand every word. We used to read documents aloud to each other before we signed them. Even the boring ones. Even the appliance warranties. It was our habit, our private joke. Nothing in fine print, he'd say, is ever truly harmless. I kept the envelope, of course. Judith asked for it later, as part of the record. I didn't want to throw it away, not yet. I needed it close, like a splinter you press around until the skin learns how to grow past it. A few days later, I sat down with my checkbook and looked through the last 6 months of bank statements. I marked every transaction I didn't recognize, every auto payment I didn't remember authorizing. One of them stood out. $325 monthly to a service called Home Care Solutions. I called them. The woman on the line was polite. Yes, that account is under Iris Dunn. Services began 4 months ago. What services? Coordination visits, home safety assessments, care planning. I never met anyone from your company, I said. Pause. It appears your representative signed on your behalf, a Ronald Dunn. I wrote down the call log number and ended the call. My hands were shaking, not from age, but fury. They'd already begun. They hadn't needed my signature. They'd just pretended to have it. I told Judith everything. She was quiet, then said, We'll handle this. You're not alone. That sentence cracked something open in me. I didn't cry. Not then, not yet. But it stuck with me all day like warmth in a cold pocket. By evening, I'd written a new list. What they've taken without asking. Phone contacts, car access, newspaper subscription, control of small financial transactions, attempted property authority, my time, my quiet. I tore the page from the notebook and pinned it inside the pantry door. Next to it, I taped a copy of the title page they gave me, Transfer of Property and Financial Authority. I wanted to see it, every day, until I'd taken back everything they tried to make theirs. William used to fix everything with his hands. Leaky faucet? He'd crouch under the sink before I even finished the sentence. Broken chair leg? Out came the glue and clamps. He wasn't quick, but he was steady. That was his way, with wood, with people, with life. After he died, the silence in the house wasn't just quiet. It was empty. Not the peaceful kind of quiet where you sit with your tea and think. It was the kind that made you forget which room you were heading to. The kind that settles in the baseboards. He's been gone 12 years now, but I still speak to him. Usually in the mornings, when I pass his photo on the mantel. Lately, it's been more than just good mornings. Lately, I've been asking, "What would you do now, Will?" That's what I asked the night after they tried to make me sign. I stood in the living room, the lamp casting soft light over the framed pictures. Our wedding, the boys as toddlers, Will in his flannel jacket in front of the shed he built. "What would you say to your son if you saw what he's become?" I whispered. He wouldn't have raised his voice. He never needed to. He had this way of going very still, and you'd feel worse than if he'd shouted. Ron loved his father, adored him. As a boy, he'd follow Will like a shadow, always asking to help. "Let me hold it," he'd say, tugging on Will's sleeve as he hammered or dug or painted. "Let me try." I remember the night Will had to tell him we couldn't afford a trip the other kids were taking. He sat him down and explained every number, every cost, like he was talking to a grown man, not a sulky 12-year-old. "We don't hide things in this family," he said. "Not truths, not money, not love." That line echoed now. We don't hide things. Ron's been hiding plenty. It was Will's voice I heard in my head when I called Judith the next morning and said, "I want to move forward. All of it. The trust, the directive, the restrictions. Let's make it real." She didn't ask questions. She just got to work. Over the next week, I signed documents, real ones I read word for word. I set up an irrevocable trust in my own name, named my lawyer as co-trustee, designated medical power of attorney to someone I actually trust, my neighbor Marion's daughter, Liz, a nurse who checks on me out of kindness, not inheritance. I moved a portion of my savings into a separate account under the trust. Added safeguards. Passwords. Written notice required for any withdrawal. Judith made sure everything was clean. At the end of the last appointment, she looked at me and said, "You know, most people your age don't push back. They let things happen." I folded the signed forms, placed them in my purse. "I spent 43 years teaching kids to read between the lines," I said. "Now I'm finally doing it for myself." That night, I opened the sewing box where I kept the deed and the family documents and moved them all to the new fireproof lockbox I'd had Judith bring me. I set it under the bed, too heavy for Dana to accidentally move. I made tea. I pulled out Will's photo and set it beside my cup. "They tried to play me, Will," I said aloud. "Tried to smile and lie and take what's ours." The picture didn't answer, of course, but I didn't feel alone. Not anymore. Something inside had snapped back into place. I'd spent the last few years drifting, giving too much grace, accepting too little warmth. But I remembered myself now, who I'd been before the stroke, before the quietness, before the world started treating me like a half-finished sentence. I was whole, still standing, and I wasn't done. Judith met me at her office on a rainy Tuesday morning. The kind of rain that makes the air smell like old copper and moss. I brought my umbrella, my purse, and a canvas tote with every document I'd collected. Every receipt, every copy, every little thing Ron and Dana might pretend I'd forgotten. Judith was already waiting. Her desk was clear except for a thick folder and 2 pens neatly laid out. "Ready?" she asked. I sat down. "Let's get this done." We started with the trust. She explained every clause, how my assets would be protected, how distributions would happen only by my instruction, how no one could touch a cent without written authorization. It was written in plain English, not legal fog, and I appreciated that. I initialed every page, signed every final line. then the new medical directive. Liz was listed as my healthcare proxy. She'd already agreed and signed her portion last week. No more pretending Ron was my fallback. No more loopholes for him to slip through. The will came next. The old one was still technically valid, but it was outdated. We rewrote it, line by line. I kept the house in the family, but not in Ron's hands. It would pass directly to Eloise, my granddaughter. She's the only one who's ever asked how I'm feeling without needing something afterward. Judith paused halfway through and looked at me. "You're sure about this?" I nodded. They've had enough chances. The rest of the documents followed. Financial power of attorney, limited and specific. A letter to the bank revoking any previous authorizations. A notification to the county office, reaffirming ownership of the property. Judith had prepared everything in triplicate. She didn't miss a thing. When I finished signing, I sat back in the chair. The rain hadn't stopped. It tapped gently against the window like someone too polite to knock loud. Judith gathered the papers, placed them into separate folders, labeled them with neat handwriting. "I'll file the trust documents by this afternoon," she said. "Bank updates will be finalized by Friday. I've contacted your insurance carrier, too. You'll get confirmation in writing within the week." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you." She didn't say, "You're welcome." She said, "You're protected now." It was the first time in weeks I didn't feel like I was bracing for something. I stopped at the diner on the way home. Hadn't been there in years. The girl behind the counter was new, maybe 20, bright-eyed and pink-nailed. She poured me coffee without asking. I ordered scrambled eggs and rye toast, just the way Will used to make them on Saturdays. I sat near the window. The booth creaked under my weight, familiar and forgiving. Across the street, someone was repainting the sign for the barber shop. The same shop Will used to go to every third Thursday, like clockwork. The world moved on, but in small towns it doesn't move fast enough to erase you entirely. When I got home, the answering machine was blinking. I hadn't checked it in a while. I played the messages. Beep. "Hi, Mom, it's Ron. Just checking in. Call me back." Beep. "Hi again. Dana says maybe you didn't get our last voicemail. We wanted to stop by this weekend. Let us know what works." Beep. "Hey, I know things got a little weird, but we should talk. Just us. No pressure." Beep. I deleted each one by one. Later that evening, I made copies of everything Judith had given me. One set for the fireproof box, one for the safety deposit box at the bank. One I gave to Marion, just in case. That night, I slept with the windows cracked. The rain had stopped, but the air was clean and sharp. Before bed, I sat on the edge of Will's chair and said quietly, "It's done now. Really done." He didn't answer, but in the stillness, I felt no doubt. Ron came by without calling. That was new. I was out back pulling weeds near the hydrangeas when I heard the gate creak open. He didn't yell from the driveway like he usually did, just let himself in, like this was still his boyhood home and not mine. "You shouldn't be out bending like that," he said, walking across the grass with a forced smile. "Might strain something." I stood up slowly, wiped my hands on my slacks. "Good morning, Ron." He looked around, as if trying to assess how much had changed. I watched his eyes scan the windows, the back door, the spot where the garage used to hold my car. "I brought coffee," he said, lifting a cardboard tray with 2 cups. "Your favorite." He used to remember my favorite. Now he just guesses. We sat on the porch. He didn't say much at first. Sipped his coffee, looked out at the street like he was working up to something. I didn't press. Finally, he cleared his throat. So, I heard you've been busy. Busy? With lawyers. I didn't answer. Mom, come on, he said, voice still calm but tighter. You've made a lot of changes, and I get it, I do. But it's starting to feel like you're closing us out. I met his eyes. Maybe I am. He blinked. Why? You know why. He put the cup down. Look, Dana and I, okay, maybe we were a little pushy. I'll admit that. But we were just trying to make things easier for you. Easier would have been asking me what I needed. I'm your son, Mom. I know, I said. That's what makes this so disappointing. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. This trust, the new will, cutting me out. How is that fair? I laughed softly. Fair? You came into my home with pre-filled documents. You called strangers to assess me behind my back. You cut off my car, my mail, my phone contacts, and now you want to talk about fairness? His mouth tightened. We were trying to help. No, Ron. You were trying to take over. He sat back, rubbed his jaw. You're angry. I get it. But you're making decisions that affect the whole family. No, I said quietly. I'm making decisions that affect me. And for once, I'm doing it without worrying whether you'll approve. There was a long silence, just the creak of the porch swing and the sound of wind brushing through the trees. You didn't even talk to me before changing the will, he said finally. Did you talk to me before trying to transfer my house? He flinched. I spent my life giving you the benefit of the doubt, Ron. You didn't want to come home for holidays? Fine. You married someone who doesn't like me? Fine. You forgot my birthday 3 years in a row? Fine. I looked out toward the road. But what you did this time, this was different. I was trying to make sure things were in place before they became urgent, he said. That's all. No, Ron. You were trying to make sure I couldn't say no. He looked away. I didn't raise you to be this person, I said. But maybe I enabled it. Maybe I gave too much for too long. Maybe I made it too easy to take me for granted. He stood up then, as if the weight of the conversation had become too much to sit through. So what now? You just cut me out? I've protected myself, I said. That's all. You're still my son. That won't change. But you won't be managing my life, or my home, or my money. He looked at me for a long moment. There was something in his eyes. Hurt, maybe. Or just the realization that the version of me he thought he could handle was gone. Then he said, This is going to make things hard. They were already hard, I replied. You just didn't feel it because I absorbed all the weight. He nodded once. Not agreement, just acknowledgement. I'll be in touch, he said, and walked down the steps without another word. After he left, I sat alone for a while, holding the untouched coffee cup. The wind shifted. The porch swing moved just a little, enough to remind me of Will's presence, like he'd gotten up for a second and would be back. I sat very still, listening to the quiet. And for once, I didn't feel afraid of it. Eloise came on a Thursday, just after lunch. I heard her car pull up, still the same little hatchback she's had since college. She knocked gently, even though she had her own key. I appreciated that. Grandma? She called, peeking in through the screen door. It's just me. She always says that, like I'd be disappointed if it were someone else. I waved her in from the kitchen. She looked tired around the eyes, the way young people do when they've been holding too much without letting anyone see. I brought muffins, she said, holding up a paper bag. Blueberry, not the dry kind. I smiled. You remembered. She followed me to the table and sat down, twisting the paper around one of the muffins but not eating it. We made small talk for a few minutes. Her job, a course she was thinking about taking, a co-worker who keeps mispronouncing her name. But I could feel something under her skin, like she was waiting for permission to ask. "Dad's upset," she said eventually. I nodded. "I know. He says you're angry at him, that you're making decisions out of spite." I looked at her. "Do I seem spiteful to you?" "No." She hesitated. "You seem tired." "But clear." I reached across the table and touched her hand. "That's about right." She took a breath, then let the words come quickly. "He told me you changed the will, that you're moving things around, locking him out of your finances. He doesn't understand why. And honestly, I didn't either. Until last week." I stayed quiet. "I came over to drop something off," she continued. "He and Dana didn't realize I was there yet. I heard them talking about you, about the house, about timelines. Dana said something about getting it done before the holidays." She paused, looked down. That's when I understood. I felt a familiar mix of grief and gratitude. The grief of being spoken about like an inconvenience. The gratitude of having one person still willing to see me as myself. "I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner," she whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "You're not responsible for their choices." She finally took a bite of the muffin, chewed slowly, thoughtfully. "Did you really change everything?" she asked. "I did," I said. "New trust, new directive, new will. You're the only family member who's named anywhere." She froze. "Grandma, I didn't—" "I know. You didn't ask for it. That's why it's you." She looked like she might cry, but didn't. Instead, she reached for my hand. "I don't care about the money. I just don't want you to be alone in this." "I'm not," I said. "Not anymore." We sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't press. She helped me wash a few dishes after, even though there weren't many. She dried each one carefully and put them exactly where they belonged. Before she left, she turned at the door. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "But not of them. Just of how much I let pass before I said no." She nodded. "Do you want me to come next week?" "I'd like that." She leaned in and hugged me, tighter than she used to. After she left, I stood at the window and watched her drive away. Then I went to the hallway closet and took down the dusty box marked Christmas lights. Not because I planned to decorate, just to remind myself that there were still seasons ahead worth claiming. Not everything would be about defense. Some things, eventually, could still be about joy. The bank teller knew me by name. Her badge said Carla, and she'd been there long enough to remember when William used to come in with a pocket full of loose checks and a list scribbled on the back of an envelope. "How are you today, Mrs. Dunn?" she asked, smiling like she meant it. "Ready to clean house," I said. She tilted her head. "Anything specific?" "I need to revoke every third-party authorization on my accounts, effective immediately, and I want full documentation." She blinked once, then nodded. "I can help with that. Do you have your ID?" I handed it over. My fingers didn't shake. I thought they might, but no. I was steady. She pulled up my records. "You've had this account since 1975. "That's right." She frowned slightly. "There's a note here about a shared access form." "Ronald Dunn?" I nodded. "I didn't sign that. He submitted it without my knowledge." Her fingers paused over the keyboard. Then she gave a short nod and printed out a form. "You can revoke it right now, in writing." I signed. Dated. She stamped it. Would you like to set a verbal password on the account going forward? She asked. Yes. Something only I would know. I told her the word, bookbinding. William and I used to joke that if life ever got complicated, we'd run off and start a bookbinding shop in Vermont. Somewhere quiet, where nothing mechanical could reach us. Carla entered the password into the system. I'm also moving half of my balance to a new trust account, I said, under the name Judith Caldwell, co-trustee. Carla nodded again, efficient and calm. No questions, no hesitation, just action. It took an hour to finalize everything. When I left the bank, the sun had come out in full. I walked a little slower than I used to, but my steps felt firm. On the way home, I stopped at the pharmacy. Not for medicine, I had plenty, but because I wanted to speak to the manager. He came out from the back, wiping his hands on a towel. Mrs. Dunn, all good with your prescriptions? Mostly, I said, but I want to confirm something. Has anyone besides me picked up my medication in the last 6 months? He raised an eyebrow, checked the records. Looks like, yes, Ronald Dunn. Picked up your refill in August. I never asked him to. I'm sorry. He's listed as an alternate pickup. Should I remove him? Please. I added Liz's name instead. Then I went home and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. Crossed out 3 more items from my list: bank access, pharmacy authorization, account password. I added a new line beneath. Standing tall is easier when you're not carrying someone else's weight. That evening, I got a voicemail. From Dana. Iris, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is causing a lot of stress. Ron's been really upset. We've always had your best interests at heart. Please, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. I deleted the message without replaying it. They keep using that phrase, best interests, as if my judgment is a threat, as if care only counts when it's convenient for them. But I don't need convenient. I need respect. Before bed, I took out the folder where I kept all the updated documents, trust forms, legal notices, bank confirmations. I added one more thing, a handwritten letter addressed to Eloise. Short, plain, just in case. Then I slipped it between the pages and closed the folder. The lock on the drawer clicked into place like a final sentence. The envelope came on a Monday. No return address, just my name typed on the front. The paper inside was crisp, folded once, too clean to be casual. I opened it at the kitchen table with the same care I used to open student essays, ready for disappointment, prepared for anything. At the top, Cognitive Evaluation Summary, Dr. S. Khalid. I read every word, slowly, deliberately. It was a 1-page assessment, unsigned, filled with vague language. Possible early executive dysfunction. Concerns raised by family. Recommend transition to supported living environment. There was no mention of a physical exam. No date of visit, no clinical details. Just conjecture, strung together to sound official. I remembered the man. He came to the door once, called it a courtesy check. I'd told him to leave, so this was the fallout. I took the document and drove straight to Judith's office. She cleared her schedule when I told her what I had. She read it, then looked up at me. This isn't valid. I figured. Did you consent to any evaluation? No. Then this isn't a medical record. It's paper intimidation. She made a copy and placed the original in a new folder. Do you want to respond formally? Not yet. She tapped the edge of the paper against the desk. They're testing the waters, seeing if they can build a case that you're unfit. If you don't push back, they'll escalate. I nodded. Let them. That afternoon, I called Liz and asked if she could stop by. She came after work, still in her scrubs, hair tied back. "I got a letter," I said, "from a man I never hired." She read it in silence. Her jaw tightened. "I can get this thrown out in 10 minutes," she said. "And if they try anything with the hospital or the insurance, I'll flag it." "I don't need you to fix it," I said gently. "Just help me track it." She nodded. "You got it." That night, I sat by the window with a glass of water. The leaves had started to fall, slow and rust-colored. Everything felt quieter than usual, but not empty. In the distance, I saw headlights. A car parked across the street. Same make and model as Ron's. It sat there for 5 minutes. Then it left. I didn't flinch. The next morning, I called my primary care clinic and scheduled an appointment. Not because I felt unwell, but because I wanted a real doctor to document exactly how well I was. Dr. Everett greeted me with warmth. She'd seen me through the stroke, the recovery, the slow return to strength. She listened without rushing, asked real questions, took notes. At the end of the visit, I asked her one thing. "Can you write a statement confirming I'm competent to manage my affairs?" She looked at me over her glasses. "Yes," she said, "and I'll make it formal." I left with a signed letter on official letterhead. Dated, notarized, clear. Judith smiled when I handed it to her. "We'll keep this on record. Next time they try something, we won't just respond, we'll counter." That night, Dana called. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. "Iris, we're really worried. That doctor, he said some things that made us question whether you're really yourself anymore. We don't want to take legal steps, but we will if it means protecting you." I listened once, then again. I wrote down her words in my notebook, word for word. Then I picked up the phone and called Judith. "Let's send a cease and desist," I said. "Already drafted," she replied. Later, I walked out onto the porch. The air smelled like rain and wood. I sat in Will's old chair and let the silence settle. They thought I'd be scared, that I'd doubt myself. But I've lived too long and lost too much to mistake manipulation for concern. They want control. What they'll get is consequence. The envelope I sent was plain. No dramatic fonts, no threats. Just my name in the corner, a formal letterhead from Judith's office, and the exact words needed. No more, no less. We mailed 3 copies, one to Ron, one to Dana, and one to the clinic where their doctor had tried to manufacture a crisis. Inside was a cease and desist letter, a statement of my mental and legal competence, and a clear line. All future contact regarding my personal, financial, or medical affairs must go through my attorney. Any attempt to interfere, coerce, or misrepresent my wishes will be documented and responded to through legal channels. Judith called it a wall, not a threat, not a fight, just a clean, high wall. Ron didn't respond for 3 days. Dana sent a single email. "I'm sad it came to this. No apology, no ownership, just that familiar brand of guilt painted as disappointment." I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the post office and rented a new box. Small, reliable, and out of their reach. I rerouted my bills, my pension statements, my correspondence. The clerk gave me a key, and I held it in my hand for a moment before slipping it onto my ring. One more thing they couldn't touch. I also called the community center and asked about rejoining the library board. I hadn't sat in one of those meetings in almost a decade, but the woman who answered, Jenny, barely 30 by the sound of her voice, lit up when I told her who I was. "We'd be honored," she said. We've been trying to bring back more seniors. They remember the neighborhood differently. That made me smile. We don't just remember it differently, I said. We kept it. The following week, I went to the meeting, wore a pressed blouse, my gray coat, the brooch William gave me on our 35th anniversary. I didn't say much at first, just listened, watched. But when they started discussing literacy outreach, I raised my hand, quietly, calmly. And when I spoke, the room went still, not because I was loud, but because I was clear. Afterward, one of the younger volunteers came up to me and said, "Iris, right? You're not what I expected." "No," I said. "I don't think I am." That weekend, I cooked a full meal for myself for the first time in a while. Real food. Roasted potatoes, green beans from the garden, and trout from the freezer that William caught the year before he passed. I sat at the table, lit a candle. Not for anyone else. Just for me. After dinner, I took the box of old photographs from the hallway closet. I hadn't opened it since before the stroke. Dust rose in small puffs as I peeled back the lid. There he was. William, in his fishing hat. Ron as a boy, holding a frog with both hands. Me, standing in front of the school library, holding a plaque I'd nearly forgotten. I took one photo out and set it on the mantel. It was from a summer picnic. Ron must have been 12. I was wearing a blue dress I sewed myself. William had his arm around my shoulder. We looked like a family, and we were. But families shift. They age, fracture, drift. Love doesn't vanish. But trust? Trust can run dry. Now I build new things. Boundaries, routines, quiet joy. Not spite, not punishment. Just shape, clarity. That's what the wall is for. Not to block love, but to give it no place to disguise harm. And if they come knocking again, they'll find a door that opens only on my terms. The letter came 2 weeks later. Handwritten. No return address, but I recognized the slant of Ron's handwriting before I even opened it. He used to write me notes as a boy. Gone to the creek. Or back before dark. This one was longer. Mom, I've been thinking about everything. The lawyer, the documents, the way we left things. I know you think I crossed a line. Maybe I did. But it didn't come from hate. It came from fear. You had a stroke. You live alone. Dana and I panicked. We didn't want to wake up one day and find out we were too late to help. I know the paperwork wasn't right. I know we pushed too hard. I'm not asking you to undo anything. I just want you to know we weren't trying to steal from you. We thought we were doing the right thing. Maybe it was the wrong kind of love, but it was still love. Ron. There was no apology. Not really. No ownership of how it all unfolded. Just a redirection, as if fear could be an alibi. I read it once, then again. And then I folded it neatly, placed it in a blank envelope, and wrote one sentence in return. Love without respect is not love at all. I sealed it and left it in the mailbox. No extras. No explanations. Just the line I wished someone had said to me when I was younger, before I gave too much for too long. Later that evening, I sat on the back steps with a cup of tea and the shawl Eloise had knitted me for Christmas. The air had turned cool, but I liked it. The quiet wrapped around me like a decision I didn't need to revisit. I thought of all the ways we learned to say no. Some people shout it. Some people cry it. But I've learned the strongest no is a still one. The kind that doesn't shake. The kind that simply stands. Eloise called that night, just to talk. Just because. We spoke about tomatoes. The ones I'd grown. The ones she couldn't keep alive. She asked if I wanted to come to her apartment for Sunday lunch. I said yes. She didn't ask why I hesitated. She just let me say yes. After we hung up, I sat at the dining table and wrote down one more thing in my notebook. The love I protect now is mine. The rest can go. And then I closed the cover. Tomorrow I would bake a pie. Not cherry, peach, for no reason other than I wanted to. I used to think dignity was something you either had or didn't, like a feature of your face or your voice. But now I know it's something you have to rebuild, especially after it's been handled too roughly by people who claimed they were helping. The morning of the luncheon at Eloise's, I stood in front of the mirror and buttoned a blouse I hadn't worn in years. Ivory, with little embroidered flowers at the collar. Will bought it for me at a roadside shop on our anniversary trip to the coast. It still fit. Still smelled faintly of lavender drawer sachets and old cedar. I baked the peach pie the night before, let it cool slow on the counter like my mother used to, wrapped it in foil and placed it in a basket with a linen napkin folded on top. It felt good to bring something I made, something I chose. Eloise's apartment was small but bright. She'd set the table with real dishes, not the mismatched college plates I remembered. There was a vase with fresh flowers in the middle, zinnias and black-eyed Susans. "You look beautiful," she said, hugging me in the doorway. "So do you," I replied, and meant it. Over lunch, we talked about nothing urgent. No documents, no drama. Just stories. How her cat keeps knocking the alarm clock off the dresser. How I once burnt an entire roast because I was too caught up in a mystery novel. We laughed. Not out of politeness, but out of shared breath. That's what real conversation is. Later, she walked me to my car. The basket with the empty pie dish was light in my arms. "I hope this isn't the last Sunday," she said. "It won't be," I promised. I drove home with the windows open, the wind soft against my cheek. The house welcomed me like it always had, not with silence, but with memory. The chair by the window, the drawer that sticks, the hum of the old fridge. Nothing extravagant, just mine. There was one last thing I needed to do. I took out a fresh sheet of stationery, the kind I used to write thank you notes on. I sat at the table, uncapped my pen, and began. To those who've followed this story, you might be wondering if I regret any of it. The confrontation, the legal steps, the firm lines drawn after years of too much patience. I don't. Because the truth is, when someone tries to reduce you to a signature, a checkbox, a fading version of who you were, they don't get to claim your silence as consent. You don't owe anyone your vulnerability just because they share your last name. And you don't have to wait until someone else calls it serious to take yourself seriously. If you're reading this and you feel that slow erosion of your voice, your choices, your place in your own life, I want you to know you can stop it. Not with rage, not with pleading, but with steady, lawful, unmistakable truth. Stand, not loudly, just fully. And if they call that difficult, let them. I folded the letter and placed it by the front door, beside the bowl where I now keep my keys, the ones no one else copies anymore. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a quiet applause. I closed the door, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't check the lock. If this story made you feel something, share it. Someone else may need the courage it carries. And if you're standing your ground now, I see you. Keep going.